Welcome to the second episode of the Good for America podcast. I'm your host, former Congressman Bob Good from Virginia's 5th District. We'll be confronting the most important issues of the day, the most critical issues facing our country, the relevant news, and the other political and cultural concerns. You can count on me to speak the truth to power, irrespective of party or personality, and to let you know when our elected officials are letting us down or betraying our trust. Please be sure and subscribe to the podcast. Follow me on social media at Rep Bob Good, rate the show, and share it with your friends. I've titled this podcast, The Truth About America and Immigration. The border invasion and our immigration policies was one of the issues I focused primarily upon during my time in Congress. And it doesn't get as much conversation today because President Trump has done such an effective job in his first 4 months in office at addressing the border invasion. In fact, he has reduced the border invasion by an incredible 99%, during his first 4 months in office. And so many Americans can be kind of guilty of thinking the issue has been fixed. But there was a stark reminder about the threat to our country from Biden's 4 years of the border invasion. There was a stark reminder of the threat from that border invasion with what just happened a couple of days ago with the 12 people who were burned by the terrorist attack in Boulder, Colorado, or actually the 12 people who were injured from that attack. This follows just recently, a couple of weeks ago, 2 Israeli embassy staffers who were gunned down and killed in Washington, D.C. For that, a couple of months earlier, we had the Jewish governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. His home was burned down. We are under a tremendous amount of threat as a country, our safety and security, because of the Biden border invasion. Frankly, we just don't know who is in our country. Again, President Trump has reduced the border invasion down by 99%. During Biden's presidency, we had as many as 10,000 illegals a day entering our country, and that's been reduced to some 100 or so a day under President Trump. Now, by the way, with respect to the big ugly bill, the reconciliation bill that we talked about in the last episode, the administration is asking for $46 billion more for Homeland Security. And it's just as an aside, while President Trump has done, again, a tremendous job reducing the invasion by 99%, he's done that without any more wall being constructed. He's done that without any additional resources or money being applied to the invasion or to secure our borders. So why are they asking for $46 billion? Homeland Secretary Kristi Noem came before a Senate hearing, and you might have seen Senators Rand Paul, Senators Ron Johnson saying, hey, you're asking for too much money. How and why would you need $46 billion to secure the border? And Kristi Noem could not answer that question, could not defend that amount of money. And Senator Paul broke that down and said, hey, if we put 1,000 miles of border wall in place and we spend $12 million a mile, that's only $12 billion. So how do we come up with $46 billion? So I just say that as an aside because we were talking about the big ugly bill and its negative fiscal impact in the last episode, because everything should be looked at through a fiscal lens when it comes to what the federal government does, the policies that Congress puts in place, the spending, because every dollar that Congress votes to spend, every dollar Congress votes to appropriate, every dollar in the big beautiful bill is essentially borrowed. That's the case when you have nearly $37 trillion in debt. But again, President Trump has done an incredible job with reducing the border invasion by some 99% in his first 4 months. That demonstrates that as opposed to what the previous administration, what Biden and Mayorkas and the Democrats were telling us, it wasn't new policies or new laws or new resources that were required to secure the border. It was a matter of will and a matter of execution. And Tom Homan and Secretary Noem and President Trump's administration has done a tremendous job of just applying the will, the resolve, the determination to secure the border, and we're seeing that impact today. But another word of caution, those policies are easily reversible by the next Democrat president. All you got to do is look at what happened during the previous 4 years. President Trump, 4 years ago at the end of his term was largely eliminating the illegal border invasion. that he had inherited from Barack Obama and previous presidents. And then President Biden just opened the border. He literally promised to do that, and he kept his word. Remember the tens of thousands that were amassed at the border after the election of 2020? Their Joe Biden t-shirts on, ready to invade our country with the help and the assistance of the Biden administration. In fact, during that 4 years, every resource, every policy change, every effort related to the border by Biden and Secretary Mayorkas and his administration was designed to bring more illegals into the country as quickly as possible. So President Trump's outstanding policies that are being executed are temporary at best and easily reversible if we don't codify those policies into law. So he needs to push Congress to pass new laws that effectuate these policies on a permanent basis, in addition to completing the border wall. President Trump cannot deport these illegals that are in our country as quickly as Biden can let them in. I mean, they're on warp speed trying to deport the most dangerous individuals in our country, but they're deporting tens of thousands when Biden let in some 15 million during the 4 years that he was president. That was 15 million from 170 different countries, many of them adversarial countries, huge increases in the numbers coming from China and from countries in the Middle East that are enemies, from Russia and so forth. And of those 15 million, some 3 million were what are called gotaways, the ones who paid the criminal cartels even more to come into our country and evade apprehension. And what I'm speaking to is that everyone and everything that was coming across the border during the Biden administration was coming under the control of the criminal cartels, the Mexican crime cartels, who were charging tens of thousands of dollars to bring illegals into the country. And they charged even more for those who were the gotaways. In other words, the ones who didn't surrender to Biden's border patrol for the free travel, the free housing, the free health care, the free social services and education services in our country, the very generous policies under Joe Biden. The ones, again, some 12 million came and surrendered to Border Patrol to take advantage of that. And then another 3 million that we know of were the gotaways. Those are the ones with the terrorist ties, the criminal backgrounds, trafficking drugs and children, women into the country, the most dangerous ones who were allowed into our country intentionally by the Biden administration. What a massive scale of dangerous individuals, some 3 million known gotaways during Biden's 4 years in office. We need to be reminded about that, not forget about that just because the border flow has been reduced so much by President Trump and his policies today, because those individuals are still here for the most part. And let's just say only 10% of them are really dangerous individuals. So only some 300,000 out of 3 million. I don't think anybody would take that bet that unvetted individuals who paid the cartels more to come into the country and evade apprehension when the Biden administration was going to let them stay in the country anyway, that only 10% of them would be dangerous, but that would be 300,000 really dangerous individuals. Think about how 9/11 was perpetrated by only 19 people and those 3,000 that died in the World Trade Center. Think about what just happened on October 7, a year and a half ago in Israel, with just a couple of thousand terrorists who perpetrated that terrible death and destruction, that terrorist attack that took some 1,200 Israeli lives. What could happen with the hundreds of thousands or millions of dangerous individuals that are here? We're just beginning to scratch the surface. And that's why what President Trump is doing and his administration is so important, to try to deport as many of these individuals as possible, as quickly as possible. But it's also important to remember that the Democrat Party did this on purpose. They did this to the American people over the 4 years. All elected Democrats were complicit on the federal level. All members of Congress were complicit. They all supported the open border policies. They all defended the open border policies. They all lied about the fact that the border was open and that illegals, dangerous individuals were flooding into our country. And of course, Democrats, whenever you would bring that up over the last 4 years, they would just say things like, oh, we need comprehensive immigration reform, as if we couldn't secure our border and stop the invasion until we changed our overall immigration policies to whatever they thought they should be changed to. But Democrats did it on purpose. I'll remind you, there are no longer any moderate Democrats in Congress or in Washington, or for that matter, elected Democrats across the country. Republicans have moderates and conservatives and everything in between, and we battle within our party on ideological basis and policies and so forth. But the Democrats, they all vote the same. They all vote for the radical leftist extreme policies, and there's no daylight in Washington between those Democrats who talk like moderates back when they're home in their district or when they're doing interviews, and those who are admittedly open squad-like radicals. There's no difference in the voting record, and that's all that really matters. I would challenge you to find a difference between Abigail Spanberger, for example, who served in the Virginia delegation during my time in Washington and now is trying to become the Virginia governor. Show me any daylight between her radical extreme leftist voting record and AOC's. There's no difference. She voted in lockstep with Nancy Pelosi and the squad. Show me any difference between the senators from Virginia who like to try to talk like moderates, Senator Mark Warner, Senator Tim Kaine. Show me any difference in their voting record and that of Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or the most extreme Democrats in terms of the rhetoric. These senators from Virginia, they talk like moderates when they're back home. I guess they feel kind of bad about their extreme voting record, but there's no difference in the Democrats between how they vote from those who talk the most extreme leftist and those who talk more moderate. And they all supported these open border policies. You know, Democrats never answered during the 4 years of the Biden administration. When I was engaging with other Democrats on the House floor, in my committees, or in debate or in interviews, you could never get the Democrats to answer the question, what is the end game of the border invasion? I would ask Democrats in the Virginia delegation, again, on my budget committee, on my education committee, on the House floor in debate, what is the end game here? What is the objective of the border invasion? Do you deny that it's taking place? And to some degree they did. Do you not care that it's taking place? Do you deny that it is causing harm to our country or threatening our country from a safety and security standpoint, not to mention the taxing of our resources, our social services, our healthcare system, our education system, our immigration system, our law enforcement personnel, and so forth. But what is the end game? What's the objective? Democrats would never answer that. Then I would ask Democrats, how many is too many? We've got roughly, just rounding off, 300 million Americans, a little over that, closer to 350 million Americans. And 95% of the world doesn't live in the United States. 95% of the world is that other 7 billion plus who live outside of the United States. How many of them would come here if they could? How many would want to come here if it was possible? Conservative estimate would be 1 billion of the world's 7 billion. I'd submit it's probably more like 6 billion, that most of the world would like to come to the United States if they could. And with Biden and the Democrats' open border policies, that was perpetuated, and the vast majority of the world's population would try to come here. But at some point, as you flood your country, as you flood the United States with non-Americans, with non-citizens, with those who don't speak our language, they don't embrace our culture, they don't accept our values. They don't have respect for the rule of law. They don't have loyalty to our Constitution. They're not patriotically assimilating. They don't they don't place a value or premium on life the way that we do. They don't believe in our founding principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and our capitalistic free enterprise system, and those kinds of things. At some point, when you overwhelm the population with those who aren't Americans and don't have those same adherence or the same loyalty to things that make us what we are as a nation, then you're no longer America. And again, the Democrats would never answer that question during my 4 years when I would ask them, how many is too many? What numbers make us no longer America? The bottom line is a big difference between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats believe everybody around the world has the right to come here, to be here, to stay here, whether legally or illegally. It doesn't make any difference to them. They don't think there ought to be any limits to that. They don't believe in American sovereignty. They don't believe in American exceptionalism. They don't believe that there's any reason to preserve our way of life, our culture, our values, the things that we stand for, the things upon which we were founded, because they don't respect America as exceptional. They don't respect America as the shining city on the hill. That's why you saw so much effort over the last 4 years for Democrats to try to rewrite history and to try to deceive everyone on how we were founded and what our founding principles were and about the history of America. Trump is right, by the way, to challenge the birthright citizenship policies. I'm so thankful that he's doing that. Illegals or non-citizens are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States as described in the 14th Amendment. It was the 14th Amendment that gave birthright citizenship. But of course, that was intended by the founders, or excuse me, not the founders, but by the elected representatives at that time, to ensure that former slaves would be treated as Americans, would be treated as citizens. And that's what the purpose of that was for. But no number of non-citizens, no number of illegals, no number of non-Americans is enough for Democrats. And you've even seen that in the last few months since President Trump has been in office, as Democrats have worked hard to try to keep non-citizens, illegals in the country, even violent criminals, even gang members, even those with terrorist ties and backgrounds. They've tried to keep them in the country. They have sued to keep them in the country. They've even traveled, elected representatives, members of the House and the Senate, have traveled to foreign countries to try to bring back these dangerous individuals who President Trump's administration, his Department of Homeland Security, has deported back to their country of origin. So it's critically important that we codify into law the policies the President Trump is executing, has put in place, and that we complete the border wall for long-lasting impact to keep us safe beyond this presidency and into whenever the next Democrat presidents may get back into office. Because again, these policies are easily reversible, as we saw that happen 4 years ago. Without permanent fixes in place, a Democrat president could flood millions into our border again. We also need to educate Americans on our true history. What is the true history of America when it comes to immigration? One of the greatest privileges I had as a member of Congress was to speak to high school government classes, to speak to seniors who were in their final year of their high school education, and to talk to them about the Constitution, to talk to them about the founding of our country, what makes us exceptional, what makes us different, the truth about our history. And it was really a wonderful opportunity. I tried to get into every high school across the district every year to talk to seniors. Of course, didn't make it to all of them, but made it to dozens each year. And it was a great opportunity, great experience. And again, I wanted to talk with them about the truth about America. And many of them acted like they'd never heard this before. They'd never heard this perspective before. So it was critically important to try to educate those who are in our public schools and our high schools around the country and around, in my case, around Virginia, in the Virginia's 5th District. And what I would talk to them about is that no nation in the history of the world has been more welcoming to legal immigrants of all races and ethnicities than the United States. We have historically led about 1 million immigrants a year into the country. We are a nation that was built on lawful, legal immigration. And we, again, permit about 1 million legal immigrants a year into our country. No nation historically has been more generous, more welcoming with our immigration policies for as long as we have to people of all races, ethnicities, and nationalities who come to here legally and lawfully. Another one, I talked about privilege of speaking to government students, but also as a congressman to participate in naturalization ceremonies. Naturalization ceremonies, when people from around the world who've applied for citizenship, they've earned their citizenship, they've done it the legal, lawful way, they've shown that they can make us stronger, that they can help contribute to our society. They're not going to be dependent on the welfare of our nation, but they're going to participate, run a business, they have a skill, they've got education. They're learning our language. They're embracing our values, our culture. They've pledged allegiance to our flag. They've renounced any allegiance to their home country. And they come and they're just so grateful. They're so patriotic. They're thanking me and the other government officials who are there for letting them become American citizens. It's just a wonderful, wonderful time. And most of them don't look like me. Most of them aren't of Anglo-Saxon descent or a European descent. They're not. Most of them aren't Caucasian, but they're from all over the world. Black folks, brown folks, and everything in between. And again, it's such a wonderful, wonderful, uplifting time. So I talked to students in these government classes in the high schools across my district. I would talk about, again, about the truth about our history and how we have treated legal, lawful immigration as a country, and how, the truth is, of course, we didn't invent slavery. Our nation wasn't founded when the first slaves came to this land before we were a country in the 1600s. But we were founded in 1776, of course, with a commitment to God-given rights that our Creator had endowed every person with the rights to life, liberty, and property. Originally, it was written in the pursuit of happiness. People of all races, ethnicities, and nationalities who were American citizens. And our nation actually, unlike any other, no other nation in the world, went to war with itself some 70 years after becoming a nation, again, the truth about America, to free the minority population, to free the slave population, at great loss of blood and treasure, at the cost of 600,000 lives. The minority population in America, some 70 years after becoming a country, went to war with itself to free, the majority population did that to free the minority population. Nowhere else in the world has that happened. And our true history shows that no other nation in the history of the world has provided more opportunity, more upward mobility potential to citizens of all races, all ethnicities, and all of former nationalities, wherever they might have come from, than the United States has done that. No other country in the world can a minority ascend to the highest position in the land, as we saw Barack Obama do in 2008. Where else in the world has that happened? And then, in my view, he was not a very good president. I didn't agree with any of his policies and thought he did a terrible job, but he got reelected in 2012 because the majority of the country, of course, didn't care what he looked like, didn't care about his race or his ethnicity. That doesn't happen in most places around the world. America is unique in that respect. More recently, we've seen a vice president who was of mixed race, who also was the nominee for one of the two major parties. Again, that doesn't happen around the world like it happens here in America. There's a reason why people from all over the world have tried to break into our country, to come in here any way they possibly can during the Biden administration, when that was, when the borders were open for them to do that. And then today, of course, again, around 1 million a year are applying legally and lawfully to come. And when they get here, they don't turn around and go back and say, gosh, this is a racist country. I'm being discriminated against. They say, gosh, this is the greatest country in the world. It's just like I thought it was. And they try to bring their family and they encourage their friends to come because America is the greatest country in the history of the world. No nation, again, talking about the truth about America, no nation in the history of the world that was the dominant economic and military superpower has used that to make the world a better place. Let me say that again. No nation in the history of the world that became the dominant military and economic power has used that to make the world a better place, instead of using that power to conquer and to expand their empire, so to speak. No nation other than the United States in the history of the world has rescued more people around the world, has ministered to more people around the world, has fed more people, has evangelized more people, has freed more people, brought more freedom and prosperity around the world than the United States. We are that shining city on a hill. We are the hope for the world, and that's why it's so important to preserve the values, the principles, the morals upon which our nation was founded. That's why it's so important to tell the truth about America, to tell the truth about our history when it comes to immigration, to educate our young people, to educate our citizens on what the true history is about America. We also, when it comes to border and immigration policy, we must unapologetically, and President Trump is doing this, but enforce our border, repel those who are trying to come in here illegally, not let them in the country. We need to arrest those who are caught coming into the country illegally. We need to detain them and return them to their home country. Those who apply for amnesty or apply as refugees, we need to reinstate President Trump's remain in Mexico policy, have that in place, so they have to stay in Mexico and wait to be heard instead of coming into our country to wait to be heard, have their case heard. And some 90% of those who apply, it is not a valid claim for amnesty in our country. We need to unapologetically secure our border, complete the border wall. That's critically important that President Trump's able to do that. He has the resources to do that during his 4 years. Again, reinstate the remain in Mexico policy, provide the personnel that's needed, the surveillance that's needed, the other technology that's needed, the other improvements that are needed to unapologetically secure our border. We need to unapologetically deport all illegals who are here. President Trump and Tom Homan and Secretary Noem and their teams are doing the right thing by trying to return the most violent, the most dangerous, the criminals, the terrorists, the gang members, and so forth. But frankly, everyone who's here illegally ought to be deported and ought to be required to apply for citizenship in a legal, lawful manner. You shouldn't be allowed to stay if your first act on our soil was to break our law and you're here illegally. We need to unapologetically reform our immigration laws and policies where needed to a merit-based, America First system that puts the America workers and Americans first. At the same time, most Americans want to continue to welcome lawful, legal immigrants who are patriotically assimilating as new citizens. All of this, by the way, is critical to keeping the republic. It was our founder, Benjamin Franklin, who said, hey, we've given you a republic, a constitutional republic, a representative democracy. We've given that to you if you can keep it. And part of keeping it is doing the things that we've talked about today so that we who've been entrusted with this republic from those who came before us, we preserve and protect it and pass it on to those who come behind us. So thanks for joining me again today for this second episode of the Good for America podcast. I am your host, Bob Good. Please be sure and subscribe to the podcast. Follow me on social media at Rep Bob Good. Rate the show and share it with your friends. Let's keep the republic.